We'll call this regular committee of the whole meeting to order on Tuesday, December 10th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Before the pledge, if you would, please join me in standing for a moment of silence for Leslie Hopeful and Clyde Reynolds, if you would.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have anyone that would like to speak under public participation? Okay. Morgan, you're up.
Good evening.
Evening.
So I'm here for the 2020 funding agreement between the City of Lincoln and the Logan County Tourism Bureau. In the first paragraph, you will see that in writing it says 85%, but then the number says 90%. My apologies, I will get that corrected and sent to Peggy. It needs to be 90% also in words. Were there any questions about the funding agreement? Well, I want to give a yearly update since we are now in December. Looking back over past 2019, over $20,000 went back into the community for grants to promote events, sports tourism, and to preserve historic and Route 66 landmarks. So I know tourism is very proud of that, to be able to put that back into the community. We opened 3 new welcome centers in Elkhart, Mount Pulaski, and Atlanta. So wherever visitors come into the county, they can be welcomed and get information. Through April and October, through those months, we average about 10 to 15 people a week in the depot and the visitor center. So of course, next year we want to look to increase that. But it was nice to be there over a year now to be able to gauge how many people were getting in there. Sad news, we didn't break the world record for the most Abe Lincolns, but we did have about 75 participants, and many of them were from out of town, so that was nice to see. It was really great to be a part of the new tradition in downtown Lincoln with the Winter Wonderland, the Christmas Express, and the Gingerbread House contest. And of course, the parade went great, and we had over 60 entries. That's all I got.
Kevin?
So we're going to try to break the record next year till we break the record?
I would like to do it again next year, yes.
Me too.
Okay.
Tracy?
I just want to take a minute to thank you and tourism and your staff for all the stuff that you have done since you guys took over. We've seen a lot of progress. The building looks great. The relationship with the city and the public is, I think, at an all-time high. I think those that come and ask tourism for support look for that support and know that you guys will listen to them and give them a fair opportunity for that funding. So just thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Rhonda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Again, ditto to what Alderman Welch says for all you guys do and for tourism. Just a couple of questions. I did notice in the financial report that there's $3,000 allotted for highway signage, which has not been used yet. Just curious what highway signage it is planned for tourism for the next year.
So for that right now, that pays for the interstate signs for the world's largest covered wagon, and then the trailblazing signs. So I would like, because the application has to come from the tourism office for like the Tropic sign, maybe the Mill, Historic Downtown Lincoln, things like that. Right now, the wagon with the trailblazing signs are $750. So there's some leeway there to be able to do some more signage.
And just another follow-up question. Have you had any complaints from people who used to, when the Tourism Bureau used to be on this street and now it's a little farther away from the interstate, any problems from anybody? Have you heard any feedback from anybody saying it was difficult to get to or the signage wasn't appropriately marked, that they couldn't find the depot?
In the summer, Walt and his crew put up some more signage that will direct you down Fifth Street. So I think since then it's been good.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Steve?
Or would you like to share the new employee?
Oh, yes. Cindy Smith, we hired her in the 1st of November. She's a great addition to the tourism team. I'm happy to have her.
The questions for Morgan? Mr. Conzo?
Thank you. I would, echo what Alderman Welch and Alderman Keller said. I think you've done a wonderful job. And you don't realize it unless if you're here all the time, you don't notice it. But I think just looking back over the last couple of years and the progress that's been made is just phenomenal. Not only with regard to the depot, but with all the sites around town. And I just want to emphasize, how great job I think you and the tourism group have done.
Thank you.
Morgan also did a lot for the balloon weekend, so that was great as well. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
Place the funding agreement on the agenda.
Regular agenda. Okay. Thank you, Morgan.
Thanks.
And then we are going to move item 13 up because Nancy has spent a lot of time here lately, and we'll get her out of here. So, Nancy, if you want to come forward, and we'll bring up item 13 next. Beth, do you want to start that?
Hi there. We have spent a lot of time together between Peggy and me and Nancy. It's been pretty busy. But anyway, we've got this is the request that the council, our committee, our employees management insurance advisory committee met yesterday, and we voted on paper, and it came out to be a majority that they wanted to move to the renewal plan rather than the alternate, and they were going to respectfully ask the city council to take a revote, which is very rare, but it would help some circumstances that we've been involved with since then. Nancy, do you want to go ahead, or Peggy, do you want to add anything?
I was here last month at your CAL meeting to just talk about the process we had gone through with the Insurance Advisory Committee, and then at the November council meeting, you voted on the plans that were going to be offered for 2020, and let Health Alliance know what those plans were, and we set the employee communication meetings, and I'm back here now.
Mr. Barrett?
Can you give the vote? You said the majority, but how was the split on that?
There were 0 to stay with the alternate that the council approved, 0. And there are 11 members on the committee. Well, 13 with the 2 aldermen, but the 2 aldermen and the mayor did not vote. And then there were 9 in favor of the renewal, and 7 in favor of adding that last bit. Peggy, you sent this out to everybody, right? All this today. Yep. The very end, it's the very additional plan. So that's what we were going to ask the
Tracy.
council.
So, and I think this is where Steve's going with this, the dollar amount for this. So Nancy had sent Beth an email, and she was gracious enough to forward that to us. It looks like it's going to go from the current premiums for the overall bill, not just the city's portion, but overall, is $63,490. And by going to the renewal plan, or sticking with it, it's a 19% increase, which brings the overall bill to $75,553. So you're looking at a, $11,000, $12,000 increase there to go with that. But if they stuck with the alternate plan, it would go from $63,490 to $65,019, or a 2.4% increase in cost. So my question then is, if the bill is going to $75,000, what is the portion that the city pays on that? Can you tell us that, Chuck?
Well, it'd be, in most cases, it's 90% is what the city's paying, the employees paying 10%. And
So we'd see
exceptions.
$10,000, $11,000 increase to the city.
Well, you said it's going from 63,490 to 75,553, right?
According to this email, yes.
So it'd be, that'd be $12,000, just over $12,000 increase.
Right.
That's probably 90% of that.
Yep.
So, yeah, it'd be about 10,000, a little over 10,000.
Comments, or Beth?
Well, we probably can't say too much now about what some of the circumstances are, but I think maybe one would outweigh the other if we went with the renewal plan.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm sitting here wondering if we can actually have that conversation about the circumstances surrounding that or not. I guess that would be up to Mr. Hoblet to provide guidance on that.
Not exactly sure as to what the question is.
I think Beth can bring you up to speed on that. I think we have to have that other dialogue to have this conversation is.
Right, there are certain things that have transpired since this vote happened, which kind of makes talking about this, there's disclosure issues now at this juncture. So I believe there needs to be a conversation had outside the walls of the council at this juncture before you can move forward.
Is this an item that can be discussed in executive session?
Yes.
Steve?
If discussed in executive session and a solution is determined, would we have to then come back into public for it to be voted on then?
Yes.
To place it on the agenda?
To place it on the agenda.
Exactly.
Because this is time sensitive?
Yes.
What number?
I think it would be 2C11, which is already on the agenda.
C11 or 2C1?
Okay, so in other words, we will come back to this later. Okay? Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks for the information, Nancy.
Moving down, then we have the tax levy approval for tax year 2019. Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. You've all received a copy in the agenda packet, and what I did there was based on what I thought was a consensus at the preceding committee of the whole meeting that we would seek a 1% increase in the tax levy for the operating funds, and that's reflected there. And I did put that, did add that to the police and fire pension fund as I thought was the will of the council. One other change, as you know, we're in the process of issuing the general obligation bonds. Did receive an update on that today. If you look at what I've got listed in the levy there, it's based on what was sent out in the agenda packet, $177,480. It does appear it's going to be about $565 more than that. It'd be $178,045. Not a significant amount. That could even vary a little bit. That's our nearest, the best estimate of the underwriter at this point. We'll know for certain by the end of the week, possibly as soon as tomorrow and perhaps Thursday, and certainly not later than Friday. So if it does, what we'll do is, if it pleases the council, put it in the agenda to read $178,045, and then if it turns out that the amount's more than that, I would ask you to amend that from the floor of the voting meeting. But again, it's not going to be a significant amount of money. So,
Place it on the agenda.
thank you.
Place that on the agenda. Oh, Kevin.
What are you placing on the agenda? What percentage of tax levy are you talking about?
One, which is what's outlined in this document. You don't have a paper copy of it, I know, but it's in the, you got, yes.
So my comment would be this. I said I was going to vote to keep it flat and to try to persuade the other council members to do the same. The previous item on this agenda has the potential of a vote of adding $12,000 to the bottom line of the council. So to me, it's kind of a double-edged sword that if you change the vote on the health insurance and add $12,000 to the bottom line, then turn around and tack more property taxes onto the backs of the citizens by raising their levy 1%. I have a problem doing both. I'm going to abstain from the insurance vote, but I'd definitely be voting to leave the property tax levy flat because I don't think it's fair to add two items to the taxpayers' wallets just to, one of them to appease employees and the other one to help a underfunded pension system that's never going to get funded unless we change the pension system.
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. We are going to be, the day is coming, and probably sooner than we'd like, where there'll be a mandatory amount that you'll have to contribute to the state combined pension system. They've combined, as we've talked about, downstate fire and police pension systems, which, as I think I've explained, is every fire and police pension system outside of the city of Chicago. And it'll be operated in a way similar to the IMRF, where we're given a statement that says this is what your contribution is going to be. That money has got to come from somewhere, and the tax levy will provide only part of that, as it does now. We've funded it through in part through the PPRT, the personal property replacement tax, and general fund transfer, and another primary source is both police officers and the firefighters pay just about 10%. One's 9.45%, the other's right at 10% of their salary goes into the pension fund, which is substantial contribution. So, I mean, this is something that's not going to go away, and we've got to have the money to come up with it. If we, this is a real modest increase in the property tax. If you've been reading the Courier and the notices are published in there, as ours was, you'll see that some of the taxing districts in this county have proposed levying tax increases far greater than this. Some of them are infinitely greater than this, and I don't want to get into what they're doing with it, why they're doing that. And they all have different reasons for doing that. This is a very small increase. It's not going to solve this pension problem, but it's something that will help us now and down the road if we don't diminish it.
Any other questions or comments? So we're placing the 1% on the regular agenda?
Yes.
Okay. All right, item number 6, regarding the sewage treatment plan spreadsheet for solar panel facility bids. I believe that's being tabled, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Just because there's a lot of information to go through.
The bids are very extensive, yes.
Okay. So we'll table that until the next Cal meeting. Item number 7, ordinance amending 6-4-24 of the Lincoln City Code's possession of cannabis. Kevin or John?
All right. As you're aware, come January 1st, the rules are changing in regards to the use, possession of cannabis, especially in regards to legally acquired cannabis and what remains as the illicit type cannabis. It appears that I uploaded, sent it to you all, what I have proposed. If you're looking at it on the CAL, though, on the documents attached there, it looks like it kind of got blurred out, my requested edits, but I guess maybe when it got uploaded. But my requested edits essentially indicate that as of January 1st, 2020, Illinois residents at the age of at least 21 years of age and are an Illinois resident are allowed to possess a certain amount of cannabis, that being 30 grams of cannabis flower, let's see here, 5 grams of cannabis concentrate, or 500 milligrams of THC contained in a THC product. There we go. THC in a cannabis infused product. There we go. The rules are different for Illinois residents or some non-Illinois residents, and I've indicated that as well. I also kind of go into detail, a little bit of detail in regards to where you can use. Essentially, it's improper for any cannabis to be used in a public place. You can only use it, legally acquired cannabis, that is, in the privacy of your own home. Where I take to interpret that you have to have a certain expectation of privacy. So if you're out, let's say, for example, in your front yard, full view of the public, you really don't have much of an expectation of privacy there. If you're in an attached garage, door open, facing the public, again, not much of an expectation of privacy, okay? If you're in your backyard where you have a 6-foot fence all the way around, yeah, you can see there's an expectation of privacy there because it can't really be seen. So that's essentially what's allowed, okay? I also indicated that if your home is, you can't be, again, it's kind of redundant in regards to public place if it's federally insured, because you already cannot consume in a public place, and I take a public place to be any place that's not your home. However, if your housing that you're living in is federally assured, then you really can't be using cannabis in federally assured properties, okay? Because it's still listed as a Class 1 substance on the federal level. And if you're receiving donations of federal money in regards to housing, there's still rules in place where you can't use it there. So if there's any, like, say, public housing that's federally assured, can't use it there. So that's also reflected in the ordinance as well. In addition, transportation is allowed, so long as that transportation is in a properly sealed, odor-proof, child-proof sealed container, okay? That's also reflected as well. I was kind of tipped off that there needs to be some changes potentially in regards to paraphernalia, because paraphernalia, for the most part, was stripped from in regards to cannabis from the Illinois state law, and our ordinance should probably reflect the same. That doesn't include paraphernalia for anything that doesn't involve cannabis. But again, it should reflect the same. The issue that I need direction from council from, obviously, these edits need to be approved by the council. But what needs to be probably added is I probably need to add a section for use, because right now we're just talking about possession of cannabis. So there needs to be a penalty and use and penalty added for if you're found using cannabis in a public space. So there needs to be a fine outlined for that. There needs to be a fine determined for if you're found using cannabis in your, like, say, at your home, but in your front yard, you're not, there's no expectation of privacy, where you're full view from the road and all your neighbors, okay? So there's that as well. Those fines need to be determined. We could essentially use the fines that are already set place. For example, possession right now up to 10 grams is $250 plus assessments, and assessments are $100, and that's the minimum. Okay, so if you have accrue multiple of those, so that goes up. The fine for possession of 10 to 30 is higher, $750. Okay, so it could be that you guys want to use those fines. That's fine. It could be that you want to have higher fines for, like, say, the use of on your property, or use found if you're using in a public space. Okay, that would be also reasonable as well for the council to come to a conclusion to. But I will state that a lot of these violations also have criminal penalties as well. So, for example, the transportation, if they're found that they're transporting the cannabis in a non-approved container, then they can be subject to a Class A misdemeanor. Okay, so a lot of these have criminal statutes as well, but it's not uncommon for a municipality to build in ordinance violations, so officers have the discretion at the time of the offense to allege one or the other. And usually it's determinate upon how many violations there have been. So I'll leave it for the council to discuss and for our police chief to have any additions to my statements as well, if he wants.
Ron and Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. So Alderman, or Attorney Hoblet did outline, I think very well, the what the public places is. I've read this law, Section 1035 talks about the limitations and does state, as our attorney said, that a public place is anywhere where a person could reasonably be expected to be observed by others. So even in one's own backyard or front porch or on top of the roof of their house, I've heard that before, would actually be still considered a public place even though it is on a private residence. I don't know beyond that, though. Our ordinance states that consumption will only be permitted in one's own home. And so the way I would read that then is if John Q. Public went to Joe Q. Public's home, he could not be using it because one's own home means my home and not his. So I don't know if that's in the spirit of the law as it is written. As well, I don't know if the state statute clarifies, even like if come January 1st, I wanted to smoke marijuana, it could not be my home. My wife would never allow it. I have to go to my shed in my backyard, close the door. Not complaining on it if my wife is listening, but still there we have, I think, some language which we may have to revisit to ensure that we keep in the spirit of the state law.
Those are good points. I mean, when I constructed this, I didn't really take it. I put one's own home. We could put, within a residence, not privacy of a home. That also takes into that they're not federally insured.
Correct.
In regards to your other comment, I think with the reasonable expectation of privacy, I mean, we could phrase it as property, one's own property, and that shed issue might be resolved. But we could change it around that way as well.
Okay.
Kevin and Beth.
So John sent these out and read over them, and I trust our city attorney and the police chief and his crew in coming up with an ordinance that works best for the city of Lincoln. My only suggestion is, clean up some of the wordage as Mr. Keller reiterated to, and for it to come to a council vote, I would suggest that Mr. Hoblet just interject the current fines as he see fit into the current fines into the new language, and then just before the vote, if we think we need to raise the fine, we could amend it at that point. That at least gives him a starting point, or us a starting point, on moving certain fines into the ordinance as it pertains to the new laws that comes forward. Then that way, to me, if we get a document that's written up in such a way that we're just amending just a few small things, it would be much easier for us to determine that.
Beth.
Yes, going back to when you said this had to be consumed in your own home, privacy. How do we handle this now when people want to go bring your own or whatever and go to a party? Or you can't do that, can you? And I'm not saying I would do that. I'm just saying that we can't carry it in someone else's home.
Right. Well, I think that's what Mr. Keller is making reference to, essentially amending that where it says own home to just residence or property. I could essentially adjust that language to better reflect that.
Be kind of curious to see when the fines were originally determined, the ones that we currently have on an ordinance, and then as Mr. Bateman had mentioned, perhaps we could start there. But if they've been that way for a while, I would think that we'd probably need to increase them, perhaps double them. or look at some other cities and see what their current fines are. I mean, if they were established, 20 years ago, $250, I mean, we definitely need to increase it. Everything else is increasing for sure.
Chief Adams?
In reference to fines, our fines may be too much because, for instance, possession under 2.5 grams is a Class C misdemeanor under state law. 2.5 to 10 grams is Class B misdemeanor. 10 to 30 grams gets you into Class A misdemeanor. 30 to 500 gets you to Class 4. 500. And when you get up to the felonies, even a Class A misdemeanors, we're probably going to go state charge with that stuff. But the misdemeanor charges, John can tell you exactly what those fines are, but our fines currently are much higher than those fines that the state would actually implement. So I understand we need to be aggressive with this, but we also have to understand that there's a lot of $250 fines that still haven't been paid yet because these people can't afford them locally. And they keep racking them up, and there's not much we can do from a city's aspect when it comes to that other than putting a credit stop on them and trying to get it that way, where the state usually has a lot more leeway in issuing warrants, et cetera, to get that money back. And the other thing is if ours is much higher than the state, then they can essentially appeal that, and it can be overturned in appellate courts in the long run. So maybe something we want to look at.
Stephen, John?
It'd be interesting to find out how much it costs for an individual to receive a certain amount. How much can they have in possession from in a week?
You can only have 30 grams on your possession anywhere other than your home, essentially. I mean,
So I'd be
we're
kind
not
of
gonna go in
curious
your
to
home.
find out, how much does 30 grams cost? If they can afford 30 grams, and I don't know how much that costs compared to what a $250 fine is. How much does 30 grams cost for marijuana? Anybody know? Good call. But if they can afford 30 grams in a week's time, which I'm assuming is probably a couple $100 or more, I don't know.
I would assume it's going to be a lot more if you bought it legally instead
If you
of
bought it legally.
Yeah, that's
So, even if to your point, they can't afford to pay $250 for a fine, but if they can afford, marijuana,
no, I don't disagree with you.
then they can afford to pay a fine. Our current fines.
John?
Okay. For a Class C misdemeanor and Class B misdemeanor, they're punishable by up to $1,500 in fines. Class A misdemeanors are punishable by up to $2,500 in fines, and Class 4 felonies can be they get quite large. You never really get that level of fine out of misdemeanors, okay? We won't even be close to that. In the city, we have the 250 plus assessments, which is 350 total, okay? In July, they've redone the assessments, so that's essentially what it comes out to via total. If you're caught out in the county with cannabis, it was a civil law violation, and I think those are about 120. So there you go. That's essentially what, if you're caught with cannabis out in the county, you pay 120, and you pay quite a bit more here if you're caught with cannabis.
Yeah.
So to get this moving along, we could essentially ask John and Paul to again work up a document. Maybe they put both numbers in there, the county number and the city number. We either find a happy medium or decide which way to go. I do agree with Steve. I could care less if our fine is higher than the state. This is our city, and if you can afford that much marijuana, then you should be able to afford the $250 fine for carrying it.
Yeah.
But affording it and paying it are two different things. Like the chief said, they might have the money for the marijuana, but I don't have any money to pay for the fine. That's what they're going to tell the judge, and getting the money is the hard part, is what Paul's saying.
Tracy?
Are fines ever established based on somebody's ability to pay? No, they're just established based on what the cost of the infraction is. I think their ability to pay shouldn't even be a factor in this conversation.
Speeding ticket's the same price no matter what you're driving.
John?
They can apply for a fee waiver in regards to the assessments. So if somebody is financially indigent, they can do that. But that doesn't take care of the 250. It just takes care of the 100.
Steve?
This is maybe a weird question, but if there is, if an individual has not paid a fine, is there the ability to keep them from being able to purchase, at least at the dispensary in Lincoln, if there is one? So, for example, if somebody was caught, they've been fined, they haven't paid their fine in the time that it was due, could the dispensary in Lincoln refuse to sell them any additional marijuana?
Well, I don't think the city can force them to refuse to sell them any more marijuana. But they're a business, they can refuse to sell people if they so desire, I would think.
Well, I'd say they refuse, but per direction from the city.
No, I don't think we can force them to do that. Yeah.
Chief?
Well, I think the confusion too here is if if we're busting them for this less than 30 grams, it's because they had a legal pot on their possession anyway. So they bought it from the illegal black market in the first place. So banning them from the legal sales is not what we're after.
I was just thinking maybe they opened it in their car. They didn't have it in the right container, even though they could show proof that they purchased it. I don't know if you can show that, even if it's out of the container after the fact.
Yeah, if they have an unsealed container inside the vehicle that they're illegally transporting it, we can hit them with the city ordinance, or we can hit them with that Class A misdemeanor charge. So for illegal possession, but again, I think it needs to be clarified in our city ordinance exactly if we can do that or not, because what we're talking about is more the illicit stuff in our city ordinances, not legally obtained cannabis. So we're having too much. But then you get into the Class A misdemeanor again, and it goes to the state court.
So, I mean, if we were then talking about what's the difference then between illegal cannabis from going forward to where we were at in the past in fines?
Yeah, it's no different. It shouldn't be, yeah. They're already getting a break if they're buying it on the street, so might as well pay it in the back end.
So are we just having them work this ordinance up so we could possibly have it on the 16th voting session, because it becomes legal January 1? And, maybe mirror the illegal fines. As I said, we can amend the fines, but I don't think there should be any difference between legally obtained marijuana and illegally made, I don't care if they bought it in the dispensary and they opened it in their car, then they're going to get busted. And they can argue it's legal all day long, but the law says it was illegal possession. So I think the fine should be the same. And, if they can't afford it, they can't afford it. So, maybe the real discussion is to try to figure out some way to collect the money through collection agencies or another avenue to get the money and not worry about the price of the fine.
John?
If they do not pay their ordinance violation, this is true for anybody who's assessed an ordinance violation. After their pay-by date, if they do not pay by said pay-by date, it's set up to our collection agency. And they add an additional, 30%, and they pursue their collection efforts thereafter.
Just to verify, how do you guys want to move forward then?
Bring it to the next voting session to give us something to vote on.
Okay. All right, so it'll be on the regular agenda. Okay. Moving down then, we have the discussion regarding City of Lincoln's legalized cannabis dispensary fees. Kevin?
So to bring this forward, the current alcohol permit with gaming is $2,500. The current permit fee to apply to get a feed for a dispensary with the state of Illinois is $5,000. So what I'm proposing, I'm just going to throw numbers out there for discussion, is that the legalized cannabis fee, the first time fee for a new dispensary would be $5,000 and would have a $3,500 annual fee after that. And as far as fines, I would like it to see a $3,500 first offense, a $7,500 second offense, third offense, you pull the license. I agree somewhat with what the mayor said last meeting on a one and done, but then again, this is a new item, and I think everybody should be offered a chance to correct any problems, because you can't, maybe it was an employee that broke the rules or whatever, and they do that with alcohol, but and I would like the wording to say, if they get to the third strike and we pull the fee, pull the permit, that company is no longer allowed a second permit.
Jeff?
What kind of time frame, like first, second, and third, like within 60 days, 90 days, a year? I mean, what, you know what I'm saying, how would you, I don't know. I'm just asking questions.
I'm just saying first, second, third.
I mean, first, and then the next one's not 6 months later, third one's not till, I mean.
Then they're out of business. Don't have a cutoff. Don't put a time limit on it. If their first offense is the first 3 months are open, and their second offense is 5 years later, and their third offense, we only voted on one dispensary. So if it's 6 months, 5 years, and then at the 7th year they commit their third offense, they're out. They're either going to have to take this serious to follow the rules. And let's face it, we don't know what the state will do, because the state's the one issuing them the permit, and you know darn good and well the state's going to sting the heck out of these guys right off the bat. So, a legitimate company is going to be legitimate. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Your comments? Steve?
No, I was thinking maybe the second offense, 10,000.
John?
There's no additional more, before you guys move to put this on the voting, please reiterate again, what fines what exactly you want implemented into the ordinance, for my sanity. Thank you.
Haven't you written up and passed out a sample cannabis ordinance?
I dispersed, yes, a very voluminous sample, yes. That was just a sample for what the council could look at, not necessarily what they would approve. So in essence, I need to know what you guys would want via fines, if you want to deviate from the sample. Or
I read it. I didn't see where there needed to be a lot of changes in the verbiage. I think there just needed to be the input of the dollar amount, and that's what I'm working toward. I mean, all I ask is that the 8 of us read it again between now and next week. If you don't have it in a previous email, just ask and we can get it forwarded to you again. But I think the verbiage was good, and we just needed to implement the dollar amounts in there for what the fee and fine structure is.
Mr. Gonzo?
Thank you, Mayor. I may have missed something here. We're not really talking about two separate ordinances. The first being the one that the city attorney has drafted pertaining to possession and use of legally acquired cannabis. The second one being pertaining to the dispensaries. and the fines and fees that they would pay, not the people illegally possessing it, but the dispensaries who need to be licensed, and fines for them if they illegally dispense the product.
Yes, the one we're talking about now is no different than the liquor ordinance. This is the ordinance for what it takes for you to operate a dispensary inside the city limits. It has the setback rules, the no use inside the facility, and then your fees to open the doors annually, and then the fines if you could get caught doing something illegally after hours, before hours, allowing use inside. The previous discussion was what the police department would use in their arsenal against cannabis inside the city limits.
Comments? So we're going to place that on the agenda as well.
Yes.
Steve, yeah, I say, what are the amounts again?
Yeah, I was going to say 5,000 for the initial application, 3,500 for an annual renewal. If the dispensary is caught in selling to minors, first time offense 3,500, second offense 10,000, third offense they would have their license revoked, and that is on a term in which they own the license or have the license. Not annually, but however long they have the license for.
Okay. Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. So, so the suggested application fee, original application fee is $5,000, correct? Our alcohol, our liquor application is how much? I thought it was 12.
Very first time someone
time, yeah.
applies.
Is 2,000. Okay, so this is 2.5 times. Why so much more?
I think
Are we just soaking it to people because we can? I mean, I think there has to be some rationale here. And I know we're all kind of shooting in the dark because this is all new for everybody. But I guess I'm just it's like throwing darts in the dark at a dartboard and we can't see. I guess I'm uncomfortable throwing numbers out that really have little relevance unless they sound good to us.
I can't really speak as to Mr. Beeman, but did you acquire the 3,500? Is that the 2,500 plus 1,000 for the video gaming? So that's where you got that number there?
Yes, for lack of a better thought, I guess, it's a more lucrative business. So, let's face it, everybody's talked about the money, and everybody's considered the money, and it's a very strict business, and I think, quite honestly, I don't know if anybody else has been contacted. I've been contacted by Bob the farmer wanting to open a dispensary, and I'm trying to keep it in a area where we're only going to get serious inquiries that want to open a dispensary and run it, for lack of a better word, legitimately, without causing any problems inside the city.
Tracy, did you have your hand up earlier?
So money, money will prevent problems from happening?
No.
You get somebody working up there making $20 an hour, I don't think they care if it's 3,000 or 10,000, that humans are gonna make mistakes. It seems like we're really setting these amounts based on one's ability to pay, which we just had another conversation about the ability to pay. If a cannabis dispensary, by our assumption, because nobody in here is an expert in that field, we all assume that these people are going to be raking cash in hand over fist. So when they do screw up, we're going to slap them with a hefty fine. Meanwhile, a local liquor establishment, or I'll even go further. A well-established company with multiple locations throughout multiple states, they screw up, they don't get a hefty fine like that. But they have the ability to pay because they're a multi-million-dollar company. So it just doesn't seem right. It seems like we're just trying to punish people to set an example.
Steve?
Well, this must be a little bit of a different type of business with all the restrictions from the state side, even from the city only allowing one in as well. I don't know if anybody on this council can tell us why the liquor license was established at $2,000 or gaming was established at, a certain level. I think this is an unknown, and I think that there should be consequences for such mistakes from a business. And perhaps they will take it seriously that this mistake won't happen and selling to a minor or whatever. I mean, we're messing with people's lives by just doing a hand slap, perhaps, versus really putting some teeth to it. And I think what Kevin was trying to say was they're trying to perhaps weed out some businesses or potential businesses from applying for it.
Kevin?
So I understand what both Alderman Parrott and Mr. Welch are saying. So again, as Steve said, this is all new ground for all of us. The only research I've done is in the states that already had legalized marijuana. The fees are quite high in those states. The state of Illinois, the application fee is $5,000 non-refundable, just to apply. Non-refundable. So, since the deadline's coming here, January 1, again, as I stated in my opening statement, I'm throwing numbers out there because nobody else has. If you would like to, seems like Mr. Keller's proposal is to lower the application fee to a different amount, but I can say I also believe in Mr. Parrott. I think a lot of our ordinances need to be changed, and not only changed to better the way this council and the city operates, but also put some teeth in the people who take advantage of the situation, the gray areas, or, as Tracy said, there's probably companies out there and who break the law every single day, and they don't care because, hey, they raked in $25,000 in sales and their fine is $1,000. Big deal. They pay it and move on. So that's why I kind of want to put some teeth into the ordinance to make sure everybody stays legitimate. But I'm open to changing the application fees, but I would really like to stand my ground on the penalty fees and the teeth in that penalty.
Sam?
The penalty fee, with regards to the penalty, the third strike and you're out thing, I guess I just want to encourage some caution with that. It seems like I've never heard of any city doing that with any other type of business. I mean, and I'm looking at a long-term thing. Like, we'll say they make a mistake 6 months into the road, and then 5 years down the road, and then 20 years down the road. Like, are we really going to punish? Are we going to take a license from? Are we going to penalize a company for a mistake that was made 20 years prior? That seems a bit excessive. I'd like to see an expiration on some of these violations, I guess, like a 10-year expiration date. What's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Conzo and then Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the fee structure that Alderman Bateman has proposed. In fact, it's kind of on the low side. I was going to suggest a higher structure there for the licensing fees and the fines. But I also concur with what Alderman Downs said. That open-ended thing, you have to realize there's turnover in these places, as there are in all stores and all businesses. And if you leave that open, so that 7 years from now or 10 years from now, there's a third offense, you're going to revoke their license. It's not even the same people working there. I think it would be more effective and more beneficial financially to the city if you maybe increase those fines in $5,000 increments and did that and placed a cap on it of 3 years. First offense is 5, second is 10, third is 15. They'll get the message. They won't go beyond that. And then go maybe 3 years or 5 years before you from the date of the last offense before you reset that, so that we can generate some revenue out of this, because these companies, they may not be nationwide companies, but they're going to make a lot of money selling this product, and I think they can afford these fines and fees. And as I pointed out before, we need the money.
So going back then, the stance is the ability for one person to pay. So we're going to say, you have the ability to pay, Chuck, $10,000 for you. Ron, you're going to open up another business, it's only $2,000 for you. That doesn't
But
seem
he's
fair
selling
and
a different
equitable.
product. It is equitable. It's a much
Okay.
different.
Well, I don't know if I really want to open up the can of worms about getting into the liquor versus cannabis discussion, but you can get liquor in this town anywhere, and the fines are not as steep. I don't know, how many, Paul, of the stings that happen in the city, how often do stores get caught selling?
Usually every time.
Every time.
And they're fined.
So-
They're fined for it.
Right, but we've never increased those fines. And if it's happening on a more frequent basis with alcohol, why are we not as strict with them?
Well, I think someone pointed out, this is new ground. This is all new, and we would hope to avoid the mistakes that have been made in some other states where they have major problems.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think what we're doing is we're setting a precedent that for things that we're not sure about and things that we have no statistical data, at least in our community, we're going to elevate the fines so high because we want to make sure when you come to our town, you're going to walk the straight and narrow. So then I asked another question. I don't know if anybody in this room is aware, but we do have a little bit of an economic development issue in this town. What does this say to people that want to come to town and open a business?
Well, I think it depends on the kind of business they want to open. We're only going to have one of these, at least for the near future. I don't think that this structure is going to deter them from wanting to do that. If you're talking about other types of businesses.
Is that because you're assuming that they have the ability to pay?
Yeah, I'm assuming they're going to generate a lot of money or they wouldn't be doing this.
Right,
And-
so these rules that we're putting in place now, they will impact everybody. It's one now, but if there's a council in 5 years, there's probably gonna be some turnover. Who's to say, once the state opens up the amount, that this council doesn't go, you know what, one went really well. Let's open it up to 3 or 4.
Well, they can
These
adjust
fines still will be there.
Well, no, if they can do that, they can also adjust the fee structure.
Yes, Chuck, but traditionally, and you are a treasurer, things always go up. They rarely come down. I mean, look at the discussion we just had about the tax levy.
John, Kevin, Sam, Steve, and Ron, everybody.
Well, that's essentially what I was going to make reference to, is that, we're establishing rules in place right now, and the state of Illinois, the laws they passed for the rules of operation of these dispensaries are quite stringent with a lot of requirements because they don't know. So they put in a lot of rules in place in order to ensure compliance and that they operate in a efficient and what they interpret to be legal, lawful manner. If it goes relatively well, I could see, in the years to come, maybe some of those rules will become a little bit more lax on the state level. And it seems to me that via this council, it seems somewhat unrealistic that we would not revisit this issue within 5 years, 10 years. We'll probably make adjustments to this, not unlike the adjustments we made to liquor our liquor ordinances. You know, things change, things get adjusted, and like you guys make reference, if they allow a lot more, then this council might one day allow more than one, or not. That's the decision for them to make at a later date. They might also decide that they want to either increase or decrease their fines. It just depends on how they want to do things. I will say that it's not a inaccurate observation that Alderman Welch came to, that things do have a tendency to go up, but if the fines are assessed at such a high level and that the rules of the state become more relaxed, then perhaps our fines will essentially do as well. Also, probably to accommodate there being more than one at that point. So, and we take a lot of speculation at this juncture. I mean, we say that they're going to be very profitable. We don't know that. You know, we assume that they're going to be very profitable. They could very well just be middling at best. It just depends on how things go. And I will say that, well, we don't have a limit coming up on January 1st. We could still be developing these past that date. It's just that the dispensaries are free to essentially get their approvals, I believe, come January 1st. So, like I said, you know, I think we should be a bit more stringent in regards to our laws to reflect what is on the state level. They're being stringent as well. But, you know, if the council's afraid that we won't revisit the fine issue, then perhaps set it lower. But I would have to think that, you know, within 5-10 years that we would be revisiting these fines, at least in some sort of fashion.
Kevin, then we'll start with Steve and work down that way.
I'll make mine kind of quick. Sam made a valid point. Maybe instead of shuttering the doors forever, let's face it, they're going to spend money on building a building and remodeling it and opening buildings or building new buildings or whatever. But I also know that liquor licenses get pulled. I've been in several establishments where they've got the cloth across the liquor saying no sale till X date. And it's because they lost their license. So instead of shuttering the doors forever, maybe we come up with as Chuck suggested, a ladder type fee for fines. And once you reach the $10,000 threshold, it becomes a fee plus, as in we pull your license for 3 days, 5 days, a week. Because that then hits them in the pocketbook also. And it keeps the business going. Maybe they sit back and go to the privacy of their home and determine whether they want to be in business and how they're going to correct the situation. So, again, these all can be discussed, but they all make legitimate points also.
Steve.
To try to, I think, answer some of, or to address some of Tracy's comments about ability to pay, perhaps we do treat businesses different. We don't treat all businesses equally. This council voted only to allow one license. Do we do that? We don't have that with any other business right now, right?
Correct.
And I don't know, were you also recommending that we revise an ordinance on establishments that sell illegally on more than one occasion, the amount? Is that what you said?
Of cannabis?
No, of alcohol.
Well, what I'm saying is we're implementing ordinances that are a lot more strict on this particular product than other products in this community that are sold that are just as harmful.
Right. So
that's what I'm getting at.
But then, should we then start to amp up it for then alcohol then?
Well, that's a question to be answered by the council, but I would say if I was watching this as Joe Public and I was running a business that sold that other product, I certainly would be concerned.
We should probably look into it.
Sam.
Yes, I just want to encourage the council to think again, on the 3 strike and you're out policy. But in regards to these violations, do we have a black and white guidelines as to what's a violation? I know that we said there's no in-store usage, but what reasonable expectation does the store have to do to prove that? And maybe this is more of a question for Paul. If someone goes into the dispensary and buys a box of edibles and tears it open and pops one right in their mouth, even though there's signs and the cashier is telling them not to, like I don't expect this young cashier to jump across the counter and stop somebody from doing that, like what if, and the same thing would happen if I walked into IGA and bought a case of beer and started drinking it. What would the dispensary be held responsible for a violation of that nature? Or does that fall on the individual? Because if we're only affording this dispensary 3 strikes, that could be 1 strike, and that's a third of the way to losing your license.
Understand. Inevitably, it's going to be on our backs to prove that the store knowingly allowed that to happen. If they did, then we can hit them with the fees. If we can't prove that, then that's going to be.
I think that was based more on, in my opinion, Sam, samples. We got this new flavor or whatever, and they're handing out samples.
Okay.
So that, to me, that's no consumption. I agree with what Paul said and what you said.
I thought that
You can't stop the guy from walking away, opening it, and I guarantee you these places are going to be camera heavy.
Yeah.
So I'm more leaning toward the no consumption is no samples,
Does that need to be something that would be in the ordinance?
We already have, I believe we're already talked about no on-site consumption. And so if they are caught consuming, violation of the ordinance, subject to a fine. Having said that, if there's some worry about people, being sold a product, the business is worried about selling somebody a product, and that person then turning around and then using it right there in front of them on their premises. The really easy way to relieve liability is to essentially report it themselves. So.
Ron.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to point out, and Mr. Halbert already mentioned, that unlike number 7, the possession of cannabis, which we needed to address before January 1st, this one is one which we don't have to right away. And I guess I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. I just don't feel comfortable throwing numbers out there just to have no basis. I still contend, and I know it's been repeated, that 5,000 just seems inordinately high, and I would like to revisit this. I'll be willing to do some legwork to do some research of other municipalities, so it seems, so we have something that we can live with and have some basis to.
John.
If you do want to do some research, I recommend looking into smoking violations, like say at bars. If you're caught smoking, and say the Illinois Department of Public Health catches you using a tobacco product, and they cite the business, and the business is letting them use that tobacco product, the fines escalate quite high, quite fast. So that's an example, essentially, of I think something that's comparable here in this particular situation, where that also sees high fines, and it's essentially on-site consumption of tobacco products at a bar that's not supposed to be allowed.
Moving right along, I make a motion that we put this on the next cow.
Motions, it's a cow.
So we'll place this on the next cow in January?
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion regarding installing meters on water wells within the city and who has to pay for those costs incurred. Tracy?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad we're moving on to another topic. So I talked to the council, it's been a few weeks, about situations where some residents in the community have wells for their water. Therefore, we're unable to get a meter reading at the time. The council seemed to have an appetite for the city incurring the cost for the installation and the meter due to the limited number of those. Several of us got on a phone call last week to talk about this topic, and there were some interesting considerations brought up from Veolia, and Gabe with Illinois American Water even weighed in on that. They feel that by the city in paying to install this equipment, that we then open ourselves up to some sort of liability if contaminants get in from the well into the property owner's home. Yeah, we've been up here long enough, we know things can happen. So after some discussion and some back and forth, what we came up with as a group, and I think we all agree, and I think Steve was even on that email, for these residents that are caught in this loophole, we have to do something for these people. Otherwise, permanently, they're stuck paying a middle tier when some may or may not. So the recommendations to the council is that an ordinance change be made that residents that have wells and use the city sewer would default to level 1 of the current tier. That's under the premise that they indefinitely cannot get a meter reading. They can never get a pocket, just for the simple fact that they're in that situation. This is not something that the city or Illinois American Water will go out and identify people and invest a lot of time in. If the household realizes this, and we hope they do, that they can contact the city, and the city will drop them into tier 1, but there will be no retro. So say we introduce the ordinance, 3 years later, somebody realizes this, they're not going to have a credit put on their account for 3 years of overpay. It'll start from that point going forward. And then all new homes that are built must have a separate water meter installed whether they have a city water or they have a well. So that then takes care of that issue where more of these pop up. That language is already in the commercial side anyways, so it would just be replicating what's on the commercial side. So that being said, if the council would like, I would like to work with the city attorney to bring back a recommendation for an ordinance change with these 3 items in there.
Kevin?
Can we add language in there that says single dwelling resident only? Because there is some instances where others cannot be established and an average either. So I don't have a problem with it per se, but I want to limit it to single family dwellings only.
Jeff?
So are we aware of any multi-family dwellings that are on a well, though? That we're talking about wells.
Correct,
only.
it's just wells. It's just somebody who cannot,
Right.
a resident who cannot get an indefinite pocket. I see where Kevin's going though.
Right, I am too, but it's just a well issue, it's not a,
I think
but I mean,
to address what he's talking about,
Don't have access to city water? Either language addresses the problem I'm bringing up, because what I'm bringing up is there's city water residents, that there's multiple families that can't establish an average.
yes.
So for me to agree to this, it needs to say single family residents and well only.
I don't think it needs to specify a well, but I do think that single-family dwellings that are unable to indefinitely establish a pocket reading would address those properties where there's 4 dwellings in the property but 1 water meter. But that being said, I still, and I talked with Peggy about this last week, I still believe that we need to go back and address that in the ordinance as well. There needs to be an equitable way for those people to to get it at least a fair reading. It'll never be exact based on the way that the property is designed and the water was ran to it, but there should be a more equitable way to do that. But for now, we're talking about this, and Kevin, I think you're right. I think single-family dwellings that can establish an indefinite pocket reading would cover that.
So you want this on the next agenda? or-
I think we're gonna have to have time to have the city attorney work on it, especially since he's doing a lot for us at this moment.
So you guys will work on that and bring it back later.
Yeah, so it's probably something you'll see in January, if the council agrees to that.
You want it on the next cow?
If he's not ready.
If we can get it ready, sure. I'll work with the city attorney and then we'll bring it forward.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then discussion of purchasing 8 new cameras for the squad vehicles for an estimated total of $41,560 from WatchGuards, Motorola, and city approval of expenditure. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. So we currently have video cameras in all of our squads. However, our digital ally cameras that we've had in our squads are failing rapidly, wherein as several times we've had DUIs and other cases where our audio is not being recorded, et cetera, or the camera's just not even recording at all. So we started investing in a new camera system through WatchGuard, and these, out of the 3 vehicles we currently have those in, is working great. The county uses it, state of Illinois uses WatchGuard. So it's a really good, stable platform, and we've had good luck with it so far. We can also share videos with the state's attorney a whole lot easier than we could with the current system that we're on now. With the new purchase of the 8 new vehicles, we were hoping to get a grant to cover all of our vehicles back earlier this year, but due to some paperwork issues, that grant didn't go through. And now we're left with trying to figure out where we can maybe purchase some new cameras for these new cars, because otherwise I'd have to take the cameras, the old cameras out, have them put in the new system or new cars, and then if we do get a grant later, take them back out, pay to have them taken back out, and put the new ones back in. So I'd rather just buy the new cameras now and have them put in while we're putting them in, so it's nice and seamless. And I believe we can do that with the leftover funds from the building. We got about $50,000 left in there. This, for 8 new cameras for these squads, is $41,560, which is the quote from WatchGuard that's in your packet. Then we are going to apply for the grant, which if we get the grant, it will reimburse this $41,560. So we'll have that money, so if we need to turn that over into another line later, we can do that. So I'm just asking for the authorization to go forward with the purchase at this time.
Kevin, and then back to the other side.
We install these at the dealership where I work. I've talked to Paul about them. We installed the ones, or Landmark Automotive Group installed the ones in the county squad cars. It is expensive. They are it, and as Paul said, it is a very extensive installation process. It's quite a few hours per car, which in his case it would be time consuming to remove all the equipment from the old car and then to put all the new equipment back in the other car. They are the gold standard for video recording in the police and fire industry. If you have a chance, you can go on YouTube and watch some WatchGuard videos. I believe if you're talking about the same ones the county has, they have the ability that once he turns on the lights, it actually backs up to so many minutes before the officer turned on the lights, so you would see the infraction in front of you instead of just when he initiated the lights and so on. So it is a good feature, and I think it's very much worth the money. Obviously, they're Dodges, so they would not be installed at the Landmark Automotive Group. So I will feel free to vote.
Ron, Sam, Steve. Sam?
Do you know how old the old cameras were?
Well, most of these vehicles that they were installed in are back in 2012, 2010s, vehicles that we're actually trading in, so I mean, they're old. We've tried to piece in the cheapest ones we could over the years, and, you know, when you buy cheap, that's what you get.
Thank you.
Steve?
So there's a 3-year warranty that we can do. Is there any additional warranty lengths of years? Can you go beyond 3 years?
I'm not sure, I have to check with the manufacturer to see.
$400, it looks like. Is that $400 for the total price for a
Yeah.
3-year warranty,
Yeah.
basically? I mean, it sounds as though the life expectancy isn't much more than 7 years.
Mhm. The old cameras, we were only getting 1-year warranty out of them, and they cost about $1,000 just to get them replaced, so, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are nice cameras. I mean, they give you a 180-degree view of the front. So like everything on the front of the vehicle is actually in the view. And then when the officer goes in and classifies it and then puts it in the system, you can say, okay, I just need this much of this view because that's where it happened at. So the rest of it's not recorded on the server, but it gives you the option to have that full 180. So if something happens over here, you're not, like the current camera, it only picks up right there portion of the vehicle. This is giving you that full 180 view at the front of the vehicle, which is nice.
I think it might be worth it if they can give a 4 or 5 year warranty and for another couple $100 or something.
Yeah, I can always check. Yeah.
If this is the same as the county, it also has a backseat camera.
Mhm.
So if the officer goes up front to search the car in front of it, that camera is usually hidden. The person in the backseat has no idea they're being recorded the entire time. Like I said, if you want to see the system work, just YouTube it. It's quite amazing, and it's a great law enforcement tool that in today's society we could use.
Further questions or discussion? Are we placing this on the regular agenda?
Regular
Okay,
agenda.
place on the regular agenda. Moving on to the proposed amendment to city's current taxi ordinance. Kevin?
Real quickly, we'll place this on the agenda in January. I'm still waiting on some information from Uber. I did have a discussion with a couple drivers. Believe it or not, there's already one of these services operating in Lincoln, Instacart. I found that out from this individual. So these are the kind of, Instacart's kind of like Grubhub or DoorDash. And I confirmed it. If you log on to Aldi's and type in 62656, it now allows you to shop from Aldi's from the comfort of your home, and it says delivery brought to you by Instacart. So you can shop from your home and the products will show up at your house. I don't know what the fees are, but it's quite obvious that this service is already offered in Lincoln. So as soon as I get some more information, I'll bring it forward on the actual ride share portion.
Tracy?
So, not to mix apples and oranges, but we're talking about the transportation of people with this one, right? So the Instacart thing, that's just somebody going out and providing a service for you where they go pick something up and bring it to you. So is that something that we're going to talk about incorporating into this? Or is that
I don't believe so. I think
separate?
I just want to stick with ride shares as in hauling humans around, but I just wanted people to know that, as I stated previously, a lot of times if you allow Uber and Lyft, these other services follow along with it, such as DoorDash and Grubhub, because the gentleman I spoke to, usually once you're a Uber driver, you go ahead and register yourself and your vehicle to all the other services, so that once you're established, someone logs into DoorDash or Grubhub and those restaurants or whatever's using that. So I just wanted the information out there that once we get the rideshare service, it might open the doors for a lot more opportunities in this city.
Beth?
Yes, Alderman Bateman, you wanted this on the cow agenda for the 14th?
Okay, we'll place that then on that cow. Next, moving down to the update on Fish Street Road. Beth?
We got some deeds in the mail today. I haven't opened them up yet, but they came in, so we have had to pick up their checks. Yes. That's all I have to report right now.
And that's all for that. Under announcements, I guess there's one other thing I'd like to see if you guys like. The City Hall is currently slated to be open all day on Christmas Eve. We'd like to see if you would place on the agenda for next week to vote that they can close. City Hall can close at noon on Christmas Eve. I think last year it was closed all day, but the county is closing at noon. Yeah, everybody. Sorry, everybody.
I'd be fine with closing the whole day. That's what we did last year.
Yeah, the county's open till noon. That's the only reason why we said that. But, John, do you have?
You don't have to. There's no legal law I'm aware of where you have to keep it open if the county's open, half the day. If you guys want to take the whole day off on that particular day, that's your prerogative.
Totally up to you guys.
I say the whole day.
Okay, so we'll place on the agenda the whole day off Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Consent agenda.
Consent agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have other announcements? Yep, Peggy.
We have executive sessions that you have to vote on. I have the thumb drives like we did the last process where I gave the thumb drives to each council person. You read your minutes and then we vote on them. Since there's no committee of the whole between now and the next voting session, you tell me which voting session you want them on, because if you want them on that January voting session, you have to say that now. With Alderman Schmidt not being here to get this, and that's just not very many days for you guys to read them. So if you want to wait till that January voting, just
Sounds good.
January. City attorney advises, though, that on that January meeting, we'll have to go in, right at the beginning, we'll have to go in executive session, discuss the executive minutes that you're voting on, and then come out and then proceed, which it don't take long. Right?
Well, that's just the idea. Like I say, I think we did that last time because we were butting up against the time limit when the previous council was going to be leaving, and they wanted to vote on those. If we want to break it up, if we're going to have it, we're actually going to vote it on the January, then theoretically we could go into executive session, like say at the end of our next meeting.
16th?
Yeah, the 16th, if that's enough time for you guys to discuss it there and then vote on them in January meeting. So.
However you want to do it.
So do we only need to go into executive session if we have comments or concerns about the contents of one of them, or can it just go on a voting meeting?
I believe you have to discuss as to whether or not you're going to be electing to release to the public.
Kevin?
Not to step on your toes, John, but I think, aren't we just voting, if we all read them and we have no problems with the way they're typed up, because we were all sitting there, I think all we're voting on is to approve the minutes. The releasing to the public is a separate vote, I believe. So I believe we could, on the 16th, we could all just say, we're voting to approve the minutes as recorded, and that vote's over. Then I believe someone would have to ask to release those minutes to the public, and then the council would vote on whether releasing those minutes is the proper thing to do.
I'm going to pull up my previous ordinance I did real quick here.
Well,
while we're waiting there, I just had a couple things to say. The land, we've made our last pass on the leaf pickup, was done Monday. And starting this week, the landfill goes back to regular hours. We're still in the operations of cleaning up the leaves with the sweepers and trying to get into each neighborhood and try to get as many of them cleaned up as possible. Also have some good news. All four of our projects are complete, our major capital projects for the season: Jefferson Street Bridge, oil and chip scarification, and the sidewalk project is all complete, all under budget. And the good news is that we got the pay request on the Kickapoo Street overlay project, and it came back about $26,000 under budget. So that's good news for us.
Kevin?
Can you confirm or deny whether they're going to resurface Woodlawn Road? I've noticed there's some core hole borings, and nearly the entire length has been Julied.
I seen the Julie locates come across on the cores, but I don't know the purpose. I've not heard anything on that. But the Julie locates that you're seeing are basically for fiber that's being installed. So that's what all the locate flags are for. But as far as the Julies, I'm not sure. It was done by IDOT, but I don't know the purpose.
You don't know the core purpose, though?
I don't know why they did them, no. I would assume it has something to do with pavement, but I have no idea.
Steve?
I believe I was coming down Kankakee today, and there were a bunch of leaves in the middle of the road, and I believe a resident had raked a big pile of leaves out in front of their house. I mean, huge piles. The sweep sweeper is not. It's not intended to pick that stuff up.
It's not gonna. It'll take several passes, or us taking equipment over there to clean those leaves up.
Might want to go check.
It's against city code for people to put their leaves in the street, but you see it happen all the time. Actually, one of the employees was on Park Place mowing the boulevards, chopping the leaves up on the boulevard, and a resident came out and actually blew the leaves out of his yard across the street into the boulevard. While he was there, he had already mowed that area also. I mean, he had already mulched the leaves, and they actually came out and blew everything across the street into the boulevard area. But it happens. If someone sees them doing that, report it to the police department, and then they can go by and you talk to them or issue a ticket for that. So,
Not to take off topic from our leaf topic, but I had the opportunity to review my previous resolution, and I did incorporate within the resolution that at that time, from when we looked over those particular executive session minutes, that the council voted to that those meetings minutes should remain confidential at the time and not be made available to the public to inspect. And I would, if we are going to elect to do the same, I'd like to incorporate that into our next resolution as well.
And that would be in January then? Is that the?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
So in January, you'll vote to approve the minutes and then vote on his resolution.
Yes.
Do we have other announcements? Walt?
back to the leaves again. One thing that folks have to consider is as far as the street sweepers and things, when we have temperatures like we do today, and when the temperatures get really cold, we cannot run the street sweepers due to the fact that they use water, so that for dust suppression and things like that. So in these cold temperatures, the water freezes up. So unless it's, the high 20s and above freezing, then we can't do the operation. So if they don't see sweepers out during those type of conditions, that's why, because they can't operate in the freezing temperatures.
Tracy.
Since Walt has the mic, do you want to tell us how the wrestling tournament went this weekend?
It was a huge success. We had 450 wrestlers. If you equate that to young wrestlers, and you talk at least 2 or more people per wrestler that comes to town, that's, I think we have a economic impact. I'm sure that they stopped and bought things and stopped at restaurants and ate, not including what we did as far as buying supplies and things like that to get prepared for the tournament. We were able to raise $2,000 for the food pantry in a fundraiser that we did at the same time. And then also the Lincoln Area Wrestling Boosters Association has a scholarship fund, and we're also able to raise we're going to make it $2,000 for them also, but it was close to $4,000 for both of those. So that was it's in conjunction with the wrestling tournament fundraiser. So, but it was a good weekend.
Congrats.
Mr. Keller?
If there's no other announcements, I make a motion, we go into executive session under 2C11, possible or potential litigation.
Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion, Mr. Welch seconded. Roll call, please.
Mrs.
Ron and Tracy.
I've been called Mrs. Welch before, so it's okay.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs, Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Haneke.
Yes.
Mrs. Horn. Yes. Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
At 8:35, we'll go into executive session. There will be future city business. Thank you.
You stayed for the whole meeting? Boy, what a glutton.